Just tell me in very brief, how do you define globalization?
Well, I define globalization as the integration of markets, financial systems, telecommunication systems, and technologies in a way that is shrinking the world from a size medium to a size small and enabling each of us as individuals to reach around the world farther, faster, deeper, and cheaper than ever before, while at the same time enabling the world to reach into each of us farther, faster, deeper, cheaper than ever before.
Excellent. It's a very succinct definition. Good. Now, move on to the interview. Since Lexus and Olive Tree was published in 1999, the world has changed. And how do you see this change has affected globalization as a phenomenon?
Well, the most important effect on globalization has clearly been 9/11. It's really been a huge olive tree event. And that
if you could explain what the olive tree event is.
A huge assertion of ethnic or religious identity, anger, rage, into this globalization system. But because it was targeted on the United States, which after all is the heartbeat of this system, it's slowed down the system a little bit. It's interdicted travel a little bit. We see its impact on the airline industry. I won't say it's interdicted trade, but it certainly slowed down commerce. It's put sand in the gears of the system, not in a fundamental way, but the danger that 9/11 poses is if there's another 9/11. If there's another 9/11 that prompts the United States to really shrink the apertures into our country, whether it's the Canadian border or our seaports or our airports or our rail lines, that really could have an effect in slowing down globalization, at least for a while. So that's the biggest impact, the biggest change since the book came out. But the other, I think, important thing to keep in mind, because there are a lot of misunderstandings about this. A lot of people associated the dot-coms with globalization. And so when the dot-coms blew up, people wrote that globalization is over. Now, my answer to them is very simple. It's true that there no longer are 5 websites where you can get 100 pounds of dog food delivered to your house in an hour, but there's one. And that's what's new. That's what you have to keep your eye on. People who say globalization is over, to them...
And that one is Amazon.com?
Or the one is Amazon.com, or one other that we don't know,
yeah.
dogfood.com or pets.com if it still exists. But I just use that as an example. But people say globalization is over. I would like to introduce them to 2 pretty good-sized countries. One's called India and one's called China. These are 2 countries that have bet their future on a globalization strategy, on educating, empowering their people, and designing their infrastructure, trade, and governance policies to succeed in globalization. They are 2/5 of the planet. Go tell them that globalization is over.
One of the features, you said the most striking feature of globalization system as opposed to the Cold War system was integration. So do you see integration aspect is being somewhat hampered by what has happened since 9/11?
There's no question that one just looks at a place like Yale. I don't know this, but I assume it, that you have foreign students that may have come for a semester, gone home, and not been able to come back for spring break because of visa problems. It's a tiny example. But I've had ambassadors around the world writing me about the problems they're having with smart, bright kids or professionals who have job opportunities or study opportunities in the United States that haven't been able to take them up as a result of globalization. That's a problem. As a result have not been able to take them up as a result of 9/11.
Right.
And that will slow down globalization if it's permanent. My guess is there will be technological fixes to all of these things. Some of them may not be pretty, because some of them may involve infringements on civil liberties as we've known them. But there will be fixes over time. We're in the adjustment period now.
You know, in one of your pieces you wrote that Ramzi Yousef, the guy who blew up the World Trade Center the first time, his desire to blow up the World Trade Center was because, as you said, globalization as Americanization had gotten in his face, and it had empowered him as an individual to do something about it. Now, do you see Americanization and globalization as the same thing?
I think that it was true to a point, and it was certainly true early on, and it's less and less true every day. My image of globalization, when one speaks about it culturally, I always ask people, what's the most popular food in the world? Is it the Big Mac? No, no. Is it spaghetti? No, no. Most popular food in the world is pizza. Okay? Now, why is pizza such a popular food? Because every culture has a flat piece of bread on which you can stick all kinds of local ingredients and products. So in India, you can get curry pizza. And in China, you can get sweet and sour pizza. And in Mexico, you can get, chili pizza or fajita pizza. And I look at kind of the internet, which is now so much of a driver of globalization, as like a big pizza that every society basically puts its own local culture on. I don't know exactly when, but it'll be sometime, near 2010, where there'll be more Chinese and Indian internet users than there are Americans. And that's going to change the flavor of the internet pizza. So yes, initially America was the driver of this system and dominated in the cultural sense. But I think that will be less and less true with every passing day.
Mm-hmm. You also coined this phrase, super empowered angry men, who are kind of challenging globalization in many ways. But these people are product of globalization themselves, but they're trying to create a different kind of globalized world. Is that right?
Well, in some ways, they're products of globalization in that the hijackers of 9/11, some of them booked their seats on Travelocity.com. Mm-hmm. They were very adept at communicating through the internet, even sending encoded embedded messages with steganography, as far as we can tell. Cell phones were a basic instrument of Osama bin Laden for passing messages and instructions. And they were global men in many, many ways. And they have a global vision. I call them Islamo-Leninists, okay? Mm-hmm. Because in another life, had Osama bin Laden or Ayman Zawahiri of Egypt been students at Yale, they would have been Trotskyites or Marxists. These are people with utopian visions. Mm-hmm. They want to bring the kingdom of God on earth, but not the kingdom of a race, like the Nazis, not a kingdom of a class, like Marxists, but a kingdom of a religion, Islam.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And one of the things you said about the need for fundamentals that countries need to have in order to better integrate to the globalized world, like good governance, rule of law, education, and the stuff you said that cannot be downloaded, which is good. The point is the countries which are unfortunate to be in a geographically wrong area or economically not endowed, how do you pull up these countries into the globalized world?
Well, it's really good governance in spades. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that the key to globalization is it's not in the bandwidth. It's not in the wires. It's actually in the good old fundamentals. You get your governance right and clean. Get your oversight regulatory bodies that look over your banking system and financial system in decent shape. Give me a basic rule of law that as a foreigner I can invest in your country and feel that if there is a dispute between me and a local businessman, I can get it adjudicated without having to bribe the judge with a goat. Okay? And you get those basics right. And good education system, so I have a pool of educated people to draw from, and you'll do fine. You'll do fine if you're Taiwan. Think about Taiwan for a second. Now, this is a barren rock in a typhoon-laden sea off the coast of China with, 20 million people on it? It has the third largest foreign reserves in the world. It doesn't have climate going for it, doesn't have natural resources going for it. All it's got going for it, good fundamentals. So you get your fundamentals right, the world will find you. The wires will find you. The bandwidth will find you. Get them wrong, and nobody will find you, or nobody will stick with you for very long. So really, success in globalization, it's all about that good old basic stuff. And that good old basic stuff is open for any country to acquire.
Mm-hmm.
How did Hong Kong succeed? Succeeded with the basics. Lord knows there's no natural resources there.
Yeah. Except the fact that some of the policies of the Western countries, developed countries, especially the United States, like steel tariff, farm subsidy, and also the U.S. attitude towards the Kyoto Protocol, International Criminal Court, all this kind of suggest U.S. is trying to hew its own course at a time when the U.S. is the cutting edge of globalization and the U.S. is the major beneficiary of globalization. So how do you explain this contradiction?
Nayan, you're far too polite. It's not just a contradiction, it's a shameful contradiction. It's wanting it both ways. It's wanting to force open other people's markets for what we make and export successfully, while keeping our markets closed to some of the things they make and export successfully, often food and textiles for developing countries. It's wrong, it's a travesty, and it's the great Achilles heel of the globalization system. Someone told me the other day, this may not be accurate, but a friend of mine from India told me that there was a study done about farm subsidies for the developed countries. And if you took all those subsidies and put them together, you could fly every cow in the world around the world first class. Okay, so I don't know if that's accurate, but I bet the direction is roughly right. Mm-hmm. These are political questions. Hopefully we'll eventually get over them. I'm all for buying off our steelworkers. I'm all for buying off our farmers. Let's cushion them from the ravages. But what I'm not for is being stupid. And when someone is knocking on my door as a country and saying, we'd like to sell you steel for less than it costs us to make it, and we slam the door and say, no, 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 we don't want that, that's just stupid. And that's what retards your growth as a country. So we all need to take advantage of the system, but we need to make it fair. And there, I believe the third world, the developing world, has a big and justifiable complaint.
Mm-hmm. And that complaint, of course, is being expressed mostly at the WTO forum.
Yes.
And do you have any thoughts as to what should one do about the intellectual property right issue in WTO, which is becoming a major obstacle in global trade?
I don't know enough about where the proper compromise should be there, but what I know is this. People who want to talk about whether we globalize, whether we should globalize, them I don't have much patience for, because globalization here, it's being driven by technology, and it's the wave of the future. But people who want to talk about how we globalize, how we do it technologically, how we do it legally, how we do it in terms of trade, and how we make it fair, that's a discussion I'm ready to have all day long. So I would have to defer to the experts on where the right compromise is on issues like patents, but it's certainly a discussion that we should be having.
Mm-hmm. And finally, as you know, that the earlier period of globalization in the late 19th century, which was abruptly ended, the beginning of 20th, with the tariff walls rising and immigration barrier rising. Do you see the same phenomenon reproducing again now with what's happening in Europe vis-a-vis immigrants, even in this country, about immigrants from certain countries being more difficult to receive? How do you see this?
Well, the first era of globalization was really built around a fall in transportation costs, thanks to the steamship and the railroad. This era of globalization is built on something different. It's built on a fall in telecommunications costs and the transfer of voice and data and information in an era of service economies. I see it being hampered potentially by the rise of this terrorist phenomena and how it could put sand in the gears of the system. But unless you tell me that people are ready to accept radically lower standards of living, I don't think we will consciously, as governments and societies, want to go back to the pre-globalization era. Now, it may be that there's going to be a transition here where we find the technological ways. I was just at the Davos World Economic Forum, and when you go there as a participant, they give you a name tag, which you wear around your neck, and it has your picture and a barcode on it. And you can go to a computer and get all your messages. And you can even go to, when you go in and out of the Davos Conference Center, you press this, and it gets you entry, and your picture and your whole bio comes up. Well, we may be going to that system. Certainly if there's another 9/11, we're all going to be wearing Davos badges around our neck to get into the airport, to get into the sports stadium, to get into any public place. That is, alas, I fear where we will go. But where we won't go, I believe, is backwards to some prehistoric age.
Mm-hmm. In the last several months, developments in Latin America, especially Argentina, Brazil, and now Peru, are leading people to say maybe Latin America is going to sign off on globalization. Do you see that that is a possibility?
I don't see it at all. I see Latin America in my golden straitjacket, struggling to find a way to succeed in this system consistent with its own culture. The reason globalization is going on so successfully, I think, is more and more countries are learning how to glocalize, how to fit their own culture, society, and social needs into the demands of the global market. And the countries that are doing the best, I think, are countries like India, which hasn't opened up its markets fully, or China, which has gone slowly into this, but at the same time moved ahead. I always say, in this globalization system, there's just one road. Folks, there's just one road. When someone comes, they say they've discovered a whole new road to prosperity. Oh, I grab my wallet. I know I came in here with $50. I'm leaving with $50. There's just one road, and it's the road of, I believe, free markets or liberal markets, liberalized markets, and liberalized politics. But there are many speeds, Nayan. There's one road, but there's many speeds. And every country should go down the road in a way that's consistent with maintaining its cultural cohesion, its social cohesion, but at the same time its economic development. For some it may be 5 miles an hour. For others it may be 50. But promise me you just won't do one thing, not go down the road at all. If you do that, I promise you, you'll bring nothing but ruin and devastation to your people.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
My pleasure.